The ocean has never belonged to us. It was here long before the first human footprint touched wet sand. Long before language, before memory, before fear had a name. While forests rose and fell, while ice came and went, the sea remained, moving, breathing, watching, from the shore. It looks familiar, blue, endless, almost calm, but that surface is a mask. Below it lies a world untouched by sunlight, a place where time slows and the rules of the land dissolve. A place so vast that even today, with all our machines and knowledge, it remains largely unseen. Not because it is empty, but because it is full of things that do not wish to be found. For early humans, the ocean was not a destination. It was a warning, a shifting boundary where boats disappeared and returned broken, if they returned at all. Storms came without mercy. Waves swallowed men whole. And when night fell, the water sometimes glowed, soft, unnatural light rippling beneath the hulls of wooden ships. Sailors whispered about it, about shapes moving under the glow, about eyes reflecting light. Where none should exist, they learned quickly that the sea listens. Crossing open water meant surrendering control. No walls, no escape. Just darkness below and sky above. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, ships would feel something brush against them from underneath. Not a wave, not debris. Something deliberate. Wood creaked. Men froze. Then it would be gone. Stories spread across ports and centuries. Tales of creatures too large to describe. Of arms rising from the deep. Of massive bodies rolling beneath the surface. Just visible enough to confirm that something was there and that it was alive. These stories became legends. And legends became myths. And myths were dismissed. But the ocean never corrected anyone. As humans pushed farther across the water, they began to realize that fear did not come only from storms. It came from the unknown depth beneath their feet, a depth that pulled downward endlessly, swallowing light, sound, and certainty. Down there, the ocean changes. Colors fade first. Reds vanish, then yellows. Then everything becomes blue, then black. Pressure builds silently, squeezing, compressing, reshaping. And yet, life continues. Not gently, but stubbornly. In that darkness, live creatures, born into silence so complete that sound becomes touch. Some never move quickly. They don't need to. Food drifts. Time stretches. Waiting is survival. Others are built for sudden violence, mouths opening wider than bodies, teeth angled inward. Escape impossible once the darkness closes. There are beings so strange that when humans first brought them to the surface, no one believed they were real. Bodies too soft, shapes too distorted, eyes too large, limbs too long. They look like mistakes, like unfinished thoughts. But the ocean does not make mistakes. It adapts without mercy. There are creatures that glow, not for beauty, but for deception. Soft pulses of light dangling in the dark, imitating food, mimicking safety. Small animals approach, drawn by curiosity, by hunger, by hope. And then the light disappears. In these depths, nothing is wasted. Everything feeds something else. Even death becomes a beginning. For centuries, humans believed the deep sea was lifeless, a dead zone beneath the living ocean. It was comforting to think that the darkness was empty, that monsters only lived in stories. But the first time a net came up heavy with life from impossible depths, that comfort shattered. The ocean was not barren. It was crowded. And it had been hiding. As ships grew stronger and voyages longer, encounters increased. Sailors began reporting enormous shadows beneath their vessels, not fast, not aggressive, but impossibly large. Shapes that moved with slow confidence, as if the ship itself was the fragile thing in their world. Sometimes, bodies washed ashore, tentacles thicker than a man's waist. Suckers marked with rings of scars, flesh unlike anything known. People gathered around these remains, touching them with fear and disbelief. Still, many refused to accept the truth. It was easier to laugh than to admit that. Something vast and unseen lived below, but scars began appearing where they shouldn't. Massive animals, hunted and hauled aboard ships, bore circular marks pressed deep into their flesh. Perfect patterns, evidence of struggle, evidence of battles fought far below, where no human had ever been. If something could scar a giant, what could it do to a man? The ocean answered slowly. There are moments when the deep allows itself to be seen. Rare, fleeting moments when human eyes meet something ancient and intelligent in open water. Divers tell of descending into blue. Nothingness when the world suddenly feels smaller. A presence fills the space. Not panic, not aggression, awareness. Something large moves closer. They describe the sound first. A rhythmic clicking, deep, powerful, passing through the body rather than around it. You don't hear it, you feel it. In your chest. In your bones, the sound scans. It built a picture. You're being examined in a way. No human can examine another and then the creature stops. It hovers. Watching. Not as prey. Not as threat. As curiosity. These encounters do not end in violence. They end in silence. A quiet understanding that whatever this being is, it is not mindless. It is not driven by instinct alone. It chooses. This realization has unsettled every person who has experienced it. Because for centuries, humans believed they were the most aware beings on the planet, the most intelligent, the most complex. The ocean disagrees. There are families beneath the waves, generations moving together through vast distances, following paths remembered rather than mapped. Roots passed down not by writing, but by memory, by experience. Mothers teach, elders guide, young ones listen. And when danger comes, they respond together. This unity was noticed long ago, during humanity's darkest relationship with the sea, when ships stopped exploring and started hunting. What humans wanted lay inside living bodies. Oil, wealth, power. Entire industries rose from the ocean's giants. Lamps burned brighter. Machines ran smoother. Cities grew. The cost was invisible to those on land. Out at sea, the water turned red. Animals screamed in sounds too low for human ears to fully register. Calls that traveled for miles through water, reaching others who listened and learned. They learned what ships meant. They learned to flee, to protect their young, to position themselves between danger and those who could not escape. Sometimes they fought back. Boats were smashed. Men were thrown into the water. Ships were damaged by impacts that seemed deliberate. This only deepened the fear. Stories spread of intelligent beasts, of creatures capable of anger and revenge, of minds that remembered. The ocean was no longer just dangerous. It was watching. As decades passed, populations vanished. Entire regions fell silent. The giants became rare, then almost gone. And still, the ocean endured. It absorbed the violence. It waited. There are beings in the deep that have no concept of hurry. Life unfolds slowly. Movements are measured. Growth takes years, sometimes centuries. Some creatures live so long that their age is recorded not in memory, but in layers of existence, surviving shifts in climate, changes in the world above, the rise and fall of species. Others live briefly, burning bright for moments before vanishing completely, and some, unbelievably, refuse to end at all. There are tiny forms drifting unnoticed in the water that do not accept finality. When damaged or exhausted, they reverse themselves, not healing, transforming, becoming younger, beginning again. They carry no history, no scars, just renewal. If humans had discovered such a thing on land, it would be worshipped dot in the ocean. It is simply another adaptation the sea does not celebrate. Miracles dot, it normalizes them. There are places so deep that no light has ever touched them. Valleys deeper than mountains are tall. Plains where nothing stirs quickly, where movement itself feels like a disturbance. And still, life exists, quiet, persistent, unbothered by human absence. Machines have descended into these depths for minutes at a time. Cameras flicker, lights cut through darkness, and what they reveal often looks unreal, creatures translucent as glass, bodies reflecting light like mirrors, forms drifting without clear direction dot, as if they are not swimming, but floating through time itself. Each glimpse raises more questions than answers. The ocean does not explain itself dot, it shows you just enough to remind you that you are a visitor, and visitors are never told everything. The ocean remembers what we forget, even as ships vanished and ports emptied. The deep continued its slow rhythm, untouched by human urgency. Where the surface world changed rapidly, the world below moved with patience. As if time itself thickened, the deeper you sink dot, there are places in the sea where sound travels farther than sight ever could. Where darkness presses in from every direction, and awareness becomes more important than vision. In this realm, movement is cautious. Energy is conserved. Nothing happens without reason. Creatures here do not waste effort. Some drift for days without moving a single muscle, carried by invisible currents. Others bury themselves in the seafloor, becoming part of the landscape, indistinguishable from stone until the moment they strike. There are beings that wear the ocean like a disguise, transparent bodies that vanish against the water, skin that reflects the faintest hint of light, erasing their outline. Even their shadows seem unsure dot. To see them is to question whether you truly did. Long before humans sent machines downward, sailors noticed strange signs. Fish pulled from deep waters looked wrong. Their eyes bulged. Their bodies swelled. Colors appeared unnatural. They did not belong in open air. These were messengers from another world dot. As exploration increased, encounters became harder to ignore. Stories began to align across cultures that had never spoken to each other. Different names, same descriptions. Something large moved below dot, something with weight dot, something that was not afraid of ships dot at times. Vessels reported rhythmic impacts against their hulls. Not crashes, knocks, patterns, like communication rather than attack. Crews stood frozen, listening as the sound repeated, then faded. Many believed the sea was speaking. Others believed they were being warned. Fear reshapes memory. It turns shadows into threats. But sometimes fear is simply recognition of something greater dot. In open water, humans are fragile. No shelter, no escape, just skin and breath suspended above a depth that never ends. And when a massive shape rises beneath you in that emptiness, perspective shifts instantly. You are no longer the center of the world. You are a small, temporary thing drifting through someone else's domain. Divers describe these moments as overwhelming. The pressure of being noticed, of existing within the attention of something ancient dot. There is no hostility in these encounters. No rush, no hunger dot, just presence. The ocean's giants move differently. Their size demands efficiency. Every motion is deliberate. They do not flinch. They do not startle easily. They glide, confident that nothing around them poses a true threat, except us. And even then, they hesitate dot. It is easy to assume that intelligence must look like ours. That awareness must express itself through tools, structures, language we recognize dot. The ocean challenges that arrogance. There are minds beneath the waves that do not build cities or write symbols. They build relationships. They carry memory through sound. through movement, through shared paths across endless water. Family in the ocean is not defined by walls or borders. It is defined by proximity, by recognition, by shared history. Groups stay together for decades. Elders are followed without question. Knowledge is passed through behavior, not instruction. Routes across the sea are not random. They are remembered. Lines traced invisibly through open water, returning again and again to places of safety, abundance, and warmth. And when those paths are broken, the loss is felt across generations. During the age of hunting, this knowledge became a liability. Ships learned where to wait. Routes were intercepted. Entire families disappeared from waters they had traveled for. Centuries. Silence spread. The ocean grew. Quieter in places that once echoed with life, but not everything. Vanished. Some creatures survived by remaining unseen, by existing so far beyond the reach of human attention that even destruction passes above them unnoticed. They do not flee. They do not adapt quickly. They simply persist. There are beings alive today that are older than recorded history. Creatures that have lived through shifts in climate, changes in ocean currents, and mass disappearances. They move slowly, conserving energy, as if aware that time is their greatest ally. Their presence feels wrong to us, like encountering a memory that should have faded long ago. Others are so small and delicate that they escape notice entirely. Drifting forms, barely visible, living entire lives without touching anything solid. They exist in suspension, neither sinking nor rising, carried wherever the water decides. And yet, within these fragile forms lies resilience beyond comprehension. The ocean does not reward strength alone. It rewards flexibility, endurance, the ability to change when needed and remain unchanged when not. Some creatures blur the boundary between life and death. When damaged, they do not struggle to repair themselves. They release their current form entirely. They let go of what they were and return to what they once had been. It is not survival as we understand it. It is acceptance. In this way, the ocean teaches a different philosophy, one without urgency, without obsession over permanence. Life flows. It reshapes. It continues. Even in decay, the deep transforms endings into beginnings. When something large dies, it does not disappear. It becomes a place, a gathering point, a sudden explosion of activity in the dark. Life arrives from nowhere. Creatures that had waited, perhaps for years, converge. They feed. They reproduce. They build entire temporary worlds around a single fallen body. For decades, sometimes longer. That presence sustains a hidden community. Then it fades. And the darkness returns too. Stillness. The surface world rarely notices these events. They happen far below, out of sight, out of mind, but they shape everything above. The ocean is not a backdrop to life on. Earth. It is its foundation. Currents carry warmth. Movements regulate climates. The rise and fall of unseen lives affect the air we breathe and the stability of the world we stand on. And yet, despite its influence, the ocean remains distant to most of us. A place for travel, for resources, for beauty. Not a place for neighbors. That illusion cracks when we encounter intelligence where we least expect it. When sound becomes conversation. When patterns repeat with intention. When a presence responds not with fear or violence, but with curiosity. Those who have experienced this often struggle to describe it. Language fails. The moment feels too large, too personal, too unsettling, because it forces a question we are not comfortable asking. What if we are not the only ones who understand? What if awareness is not rare? What if the ocean has been listening all along? There are recordings, sounds captured accidentally by equipment meant to measure something else. Rhythmic pulses, repeating patterns, calls answered across miles of water. At first, they were dismissed as noise, then as anomalies, then as something else entirely. The realization did not arrive suddenly. It crept in slowly, as realizations often do, with reluctance, with resistance. Because acknowledging another form of intelligence means reevaluating our place in the world, and humans have never been good at that. Still, the ocean remains patient. It offers glimpses, not explanations. It allows moments of contact, then retreats into silence. It does not argue. It does not convince. It simply continues. There are times when the deep feels almost alive in its awareness. When storms gather without warning, when currents shift, when familiar waters feel suddenly wrong. Sailors used to say that ocean had moods. Perhaps they weren't wrong. Perhaps they sensed patterns they could not explain, responses they could not understand. The sea does not react quickly, but when it does, the effects are vast. Entire coastlines change. Roots disappear. Ecosystems shift. Life adapts. Or it doesn't. We like to believe we're explorers of the unknown, that we push boundaries and conquer frontiers. But in the ocean, we are guests, short-term visitors with fragile bodies and borrowed technology. We descend for minutes. We observe briefly, and then we retreat back to air, light, and noise. The deep remains. Watching. UNBOTHERED by our absence. And perhaps that is the most unsettling truth of all. The deepest parts of the ocean do not feel empty. They feel watched, not in a threatening way, but in a quiet, enduring presence that seems to exist beyond urgency or intent. The darkness there is not violent. It is patient. It has existed for so long that it no longer reacts to change. It absorbs it. Humans have only brushed against this world. Brief visits made possible by machines that descend carefully, slowly, as if aware that they do not belong. Lights cut through black water, revealing moments frozen in time. Then the lights move on, and the darkness closes again. Undisturbed. What remains unseen is greater than what is revealed. The ocean does not announce its wonders. It does not display them openly. It hides them in plain darkness, allowing only fragments to reach the surface. And those fragments often feel like dreams, incomplete, difficult to explain, impossible to confirm. Some encounters are never recorded. They exist only in memory. A shape passing just outside visibility. A sound felt rather than heard. A shift in the water that carries meaning without words. People return from these moments changed, not because they were harmed, but because they were acknowledged. There is something unsettling about being recognized by a presence you cannot fully see or understand. It breaks the illusion of solitude. It suggests awareness where none was expected. In these moments, humans often feel small, not insignificant, but temporary, like visitors passing through a place that will remain long after they are gone. The ocean has seen countless visitors before. Species have risen and vanished. Entire forms of life have appeared, thrived, and disappeared without leaving a trace. The sea does not mourn. It does not celebrate. It simply continues. This continuity is reflected in its inhabitants. Some creatures have not changed for millions of years. Their shapes are familiar to a world that no longer exists. They move slowly, deliberately, as if aware that speed is unnecessary when time itself is abundant. Others change constantly. Bodies that adapt from moment to moment. Skin that shifts color. Forms that can alter themselves to match their surroundings or escape danger. Flexibility is survival, and nowhere is this more evident than in the ocean's smallest lives. Tiny drifting forms that exist between moments, neither predator nor prey in the way we understand. They respond to the world not by fighting or fleeing, but by transforming. They dissolve and reform. They let go of what no longer works. They begin again. It is a lesson. Humans struggle to learn. We cling to permanence, to structure, to the idea that progress moves in one direction. But the ocean teaches something different. It moves in cycles, in returns, in quiet repetition. What disappears often comes back in another form. What seems lost is rarely gone. This is why the sea is filled with echoes, not just of sound, but of existence. Paths retraced, behaviors repeated, patterns passed from one generation to the next without ever being written down. Memory in the ocean is not stored in objects. Is carried in movement, roots across. Vast distances are followed with precision. Places are remembered not by names, but by sensation. Temperature, current, sound, the subtle shift of water against the body. These memories are shared. One life teaches another, and another, and another. Until knowledge becomes tradition. This is why the loss of even a single group can ripple outward for decades. When memory disappears, it cannot be easily replaced. Paths are forgotten. Safe places vanish. The ocean feels suddenly larger, more dangerous. Recovery is slow, painfully slow, and yet life endures. The ocean has survived impacts far greater than anything humans have inflicted so far. It has recovered from moments when the planet itself nearly reset. It carries resilience woven into every layer of its being, but that resilience is not infinite. There are signs now, subtle but present, changes in familiar patterns, shifts in behavior, silences where sound once traveled freely. The ocean does not cry out. When it is wounded. It withdraws. It becomes quieter, more distant, harder to read. This is perhaps its most unsettling response. Not anger, not retaliation, but absence. The creatures that remain continue their lives largely unaware of human concerns. They drift, they gather, they teach their young, they follow paths older than history. And sometimes, very rarely, they encounter us again. When that happens, something extraordinary often occurs. There is no fear. No aggression. Just awareness. A pause. As if both sides are briefly considering the other. These moments do not last. They never do. The ocean does not allow long conversations. It allows only glimpses, enough to remind us of its depth, not just in distance, but in meaning. Those who experience this often struggle to return to the surface unchanged. The world above feels louder, faster, more chaotic. The contrast is jarring. Because beneath the waves, urgency fades. Everything slows. The ocean moves at its own pace, indifferent to deadlines and demands. It does not measure worth by speed or growth. It values balance, continuity, adaptation. Perhaps that is why it feels ancient. Not because it is old, though it is, but because it operates on principles humans have largely forgotten. To exist without dominating. To adapt without erasing. To endure without needing recognition. The ocean does not seek understanding from us. It does not need validation. It simply allows us to witness fragments of its reality when conditions align. And when we are lucky enough to receive those moments, they feel profound. Not because we learned something specific, but because we were reminded of something fundamental. We are not separate from this world. We are part of it. Briefly. The creatures beneath. The waves do not see us as masters or enemies by default. They see us as anomalies, visitors from a loud, bright world that moves too quickly. And then we leave. We return to air and light, carrying stories we struggle to explain. Memories that sound unbelievable. Experiences that feel personal. Almost intimate. The ocean remains behind, still moving, still watching, still holding more mysteries than answers. Perhaps that is how it should be, because a world completely understood is a world. Diminished awe in the ocean, in its depth and darkness, reminds us that not everything exists for our comprehension. Some things exist simply to be and beneath the waves. In a realm untouched by certainty, life continues its quiet, extraordinary journey, unseen, unrecorded, and endlessly profound.